The immense, star-dusted dome of the Galactic Council chamber held a silence so profound it felt like the vacuum between galaxies had seeped inside. 1,000 distant suns, pinpricks of cold fire, cast fractured light upon crystalline walls that had witnessed eons of diplomatic murmurs, but never a truth like the one about to break. At the central podium, a figure stood isolated, a solitary island in a sea of polished alien benches. Ambassador Kelry, his scaled hands betraying a faint iridescent tremor against the cool surface of his data tablet, felt the weight of 200 civilizations resting on his shoulders. Their gazes, a kaleidoscope of bored indifference, cynical amusement, and benign curiosity, pressed upon him. He was not just about to present evidence. He was about to resurrect a ghost. Like, subscribe, share, and comment to follow humanity's return from myth. Honorable Council members, Kelry began, his voice a steady river flowing over the rocky bed of his own dread. I stand before you, not with a minor grievance or a resource dispute, but with evidence of a significant anomaly within the forbidden region of Sector 773. A ripple of impatience moved through the assembly. Councillor Fess, a being of shifting bioluminescent hues, pulsed with soft, dismissive light. Another sensor ghost in the quarantine zone, Ambassador? This is a matter for a subcommittee, not the full council. Kelry's neck frills stiffened. With respect, Councillor, this concerns the old quarantine. The region sealed by our ancestors 10,000 cycles ago. The one established after the Great Silence. A new electric tension crackled in the air. Benches creaked as representatives from species who had built their philosophies upon 10 millennia of peace leaned forward, their various forms tensing. The forbidden region was not just empty space. It was a burial mound for a forgotten nightmare, a corner of the galaxy politely ignored by civilized society. The sensors, Kelry pressed, seizing the fragile silence, have detected structured transmissions, energy signatures that match the archival descriptions from the time of the silence. The signatures attributed to Earth. The chamber erupted. It was not the polite, diplomatic titter he had anticipated. It was a wave of genuine, unfettered amusement. A roaring chorus of hoots, chimes, and vibrational laughter that echoed off the star-reflecting walls. It was the sound of an adult being told a childhood fable with earnest conviction. From his elevated platform, Council Leader Moravix, a contained storm of sentient energy housed within a shimmering diplomatic suit, spoke with a voice like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze. Ambassador Kelry, surely your studies have led you astray. Earth is a cosmological fairy tale. Humans are phantoms, propaganda crafted by our war-torn ancestors to justify their own bloody unification. A cautionary myth about the perils of division and aggression. Be good, or the humans will come and eat you, a three-armed delegate bellowed from the upper gallery, sparking another round of laughter. My offspring whisper it at sleep-time gatherings for amusement. Kelry felt the foundation of his credibility crumble, but he clung to the data. The archives describe them as dangerously creative, unpredictably aggressive, and fundamentally unconquerable. They supposedly chose self-annihilation in nuclear fire over submission to one another. But what if the archives were wrong? What if they did not perish? What if they evolved? The laughter swelled anew. Thess pulsed with bright derisive colours, their species equivalent of an eye roll. And they have been hiding in the dark for 100 centuries, Ambassador. Practicing their embroidery? Forging cutlery? Preparing, Kelry said. The word cutting through the noise with unexpected sharpness. The transmissions are complex, advanced, and patterned with mathematical precision. They are not random emissions. They are scanning pulses. Someone is out there. Someone is awake, and they are watching. Moravix's luminous form dimmed, a sign of waning patience. Ambassador, we face tangible crises. The Skrada swarm expands its territory weekly. 3 colony worlds have gone silent in as many cycles. We must discuss resource allocation, diplomatic sanctions, and humanitarian corridors, not chase phantoms from a darkened nursery. The Skrada are precisely why we must investigate, Kelry insisted, desperation bleeding into his tone. What if we face a threat for which dialogue is meaningless? What if we need... He searched for the archaic, almost forbidden word. What if we need warriors? Warriors, Moravix interrupted. The wind chime voice, now edged with frost. We need extinct monsters from a bedtime story. The Council has maintained peace for 5,000 years through consensus and compassion. We do not require mythical brutes who may or may not exist. This session is concluded. The holographic displays encircling the chamber winked out in a wave of finality. The assembly dissolved into a stream of departing delegates, many still exchanging amused glances at Kelry's expense. He stood alone at the polished podium, a monument to foolish hope, the weight of their dismissal, a physical pressure on his shoulders. As the chamber emptied, a single figure approached, Commander Yalith, a quadrupedal being whose species, pragmatic and historically cautious, still maintained a modest defense fleet, placed a steadying limb on Kelry's shoulder. His carapace was scarred from long-ago patrols, a rarity in this polished age. I believe you saw something, Ambassador, Yalith murmured, his voice a low rumble. But understand, for most here, war is a theoretical concept. Their grandparents' grandparents never heard a shot fired in anger. To them, a standing army is as mythical as your humans. He leaned closer. You asked of the Skrada. 3 colonies have fallen. While you spoke, 2 more went silent. 5 worlds consumed. They do not answer hails. They do not negotiate. My requests to deploy the fleet for reconnaissance are met with calls for more time for peaceful outreach. How much time do we have, Commander? Less than they think, Yalith said grimly, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's dying lights. Keep investigating your signals, Kelry. For all our sakes, I hope you are wrong about them. But for our immediate survival, I also hope you are right. Dejected but undeterred, Kelry retreated to his office. A modest space overlooking the serene, garden-spired capital of the Council homeworld. 20 cycles of diligent service had earned him this voice in galactic affairs, and in one afternoon he had traded it for ridicule. Yet the data on his private terminal was implacable. The signals were faint, yes. Intermittent, certainly, but they were undeniably there. A rhythmic, intelligent pulse emanating from the heart of the forbidden darkness. More than a beacon, it was a searchlight, methodically sweeping the galactic arm beyond its prison. Driven by a scholar's obsession and a diplomat's dawning horror, Kelry plunged into the oldest, most fragmented archives. In an era that worshipped peace, pre-council histories were often encrypted, purged, or sanitized. Embarrassed memories of barbaric pasts. But fragments persisted. Whispered references to a species that fought not with rage, but with a terrifying, calculative efficiency. Descriptions of warships that could strike from nowhere and vanish into the void. Accounts of soldiers who, when faced with obliteration, simply refused to stop coming. And then he found it, the Treaty of Terror, or, as some translations had it, the Treaty of Terror, a mutual defense pact allegedly signed between the nascent Council and the Terran Alliance in the shadow of Earth's supposed destruction. Its promise was chillingly simple. If the Council ever faced an existential threat, a specific beacon signal would be answered. Most modern historians dismissed it as a fraud, a retroactive legend fabricated to lend mythical legitimacy to the Council's founding. The beacon coordinates pointed to barren space. The encryption keys were nonsense. But what if the historians, comfortable in their peace, were wrong? The beacon's control interface was buried in the archaic sublevels of the planetary network, a digital fossil. Its commands were written in a dialect of galactic standard, so ancient Kelry needed 3 translation matrices to decipher it. With a profound sense of either destiny or despair, he entered the coordinates from the treaty. The system accepted them. He input the encryption sequence. A dormant progress bar, untouched for millennia, began to fill. His hand hovered over the final activation command. If this was a fool's errand, he would drain power reserves on a useless broadcast to an empty grave. If it was real, his terminal chimed urgently. A priority alert. Another colony, the 6th, had vanished from the network. The Skrada were not expanding. They were consuming, and they were at the galactic rim. Attached was a single-line message from Yalith. Council still debating. Time runs out. There was no more debate to be had. Kelry pressed the command. For 3 seconds, a burst of compressed data, carried on quantum-entangled particles that defied distance, shot into the void toward the forbidden region. A whisper lost for 10,000 years was suddenly shouted into the dark. Then, the system fell dormant once more, its purpose finally, possibly, fulfilled. Now what? Kelry whispered to the silent room. The answer came not in hours, but in minutes. Every sensor array across Council space screamed to life. From the depths of the quarantine zone, a power spike of impossible magnitude erupted. A silent, seismic blast of energy that registered on instruments designed to monitor stellar flares. Something vast had stirred. Something had awoken. And then, just as abruptly, the sensors fell silent. Whatever had reacted had either powered down or slipped beyond their ability to detect, moving with terrifying purpose. Kelry's communicator erupted with frantic calls. The same delegates who had laughed now demanded explanations in voices shrill with nascent fear. What had he done? What was coming? He had no answers. He could only stare at the silent data stream, a cold certainty settling in his gut. Something had been waiting. Something had been listening. And it had just heard its name. The galaxy learned the anatomy of fear over the next 10 days. It was not a sharp, sudden pain, but a slow, cold suffocation, as star after star winked out on the Council's astral maps, swallowed by the advancing shadow of the Skrada swarm. The pretense of gradual expansion was discarded like a useless husk. From hidden staging grounds, their fleets emerged, not as armadas of welded metal, but as organic, pulsating clouds of chitin and bioluminescence. They struck 20 worlds simultaneously, a coordinated symphony of obliteration. They did not issue demands. They did not offer terms of surrender. They simply consumed, overwhelming planetary defenses with mindless, relentless numbers, stripping worlds of all biomass, leaving behind barren, silent rocks veiled in a haze of organic debris. Commander Yalith's small defense fleet became a flicker of desperate light in the overwhelming dark. He managed to evacuate one world, saving millions in a heroic, scrambling retreat. His ships harried by Skradar skirmishers that seemed to bleed from the shadows of asteroids. His was the only coordinated military resistance the once proud Galactic Council could muster. The other species, in their enlightened peace, had long ago retrofitted their warships into trading vessels, their weapons into terraforming tools. They possessed treaties, not tactics, diplomats, not soldiers. They had forgotten, in their bones, how to fight. The council chamber, once a monument to serene debate, transformed into a pit of visceral panic. The air, usually scented with calming pheromones, now thrummed with the acrid smells of distress chemicals and fear sweat. Representatives shrieked over one another, demanding solutions that belonged to a forgotten age. We must open diplomatic channels. Moravix's energy form flickered erratically, a visual representation of crumbling composure. There must be a logic, a demand we can meet, some negotiation. They are eating our people, a delegate from a fallen aquatic world wailed, their voice box vibrating with grief. They do not want minerals or territory. They want us. They are a galactic plague. The chamber descended into a chaos of despair. Some called for immediate, abject surrender, hoping the swarm might spare them as livestock. Others advocated for physically impossible last stands. A few simply curled in their seats, emitting low-frequency waves of pure, uncomprehending terror. It was into this maelstrom that Ambassador Kelry rose once more. He did not shout. He simply stood, and the terrible gravity of his silence drew every eye. "The beacon," he said, his voice cutting through the din like a knife, "was activated 10 days ago." I activated the ancient Terran distress signal. A hush fell. So complete the only sound was the faint hum of the life support systems. If the old treaty was real, if Earth exists, they received our call. And, Moravix asked, the word a barely audible shimmer of light. "And we wait," Kelry said. The treaty promised they would respond to an existential threat. If humans are real, they will come. And if they are not? Thes pulsed, their colors pale and washed out with dread. Kelry offered no comfort. "Then we are already dead. We just do not know it yet." The council, grasping at the thinnest reed of hope, voted to send envoys to the swarm, offering total submission in exchange for the sparing of civilian populations. The envoys' ships were torn apart before they could finish broadcasting their surrender. Their debris fields became new, grisly asteroid belts. Yalith made his stand at the Battle of Kelvin's Star, a doomed, defiant act of purchase. Using tactical algorithms scavenged from historical databases, theoretical exercises no living commander had ever used in earnest, his fleet destroyed 3 Skradar vessels before being engulfed. His flagship, the Steadfast, limped back to Council space, a gutted wreck, half its crew dead. Yalith himself, sustained by emergency med drones. The cost had bought time for one more evacuation. It changed nothing. 27 worlds had fallen. Billions were gone. The swarm's advance was now a tidal wave, poised to crash upon the core systems themselves. In the chamber, beneath the glow of maps saturated with crimson defeat, Moravix called for a final, somber vote. Complete and unconditional surrender to the Skreda swarm, the council leader intoned. Their light dimmed to a faint, defeated glow. We have tried peace. We have tried resistance. We have nothing left but the hope that in submission, some fragment of our civilizations might persist, even if only as specimens. It is not life, but it is not extinction. One by one, in a ritual of collective suicide, delegates raised their limbs, tentacles, or glowed their assent. Some wept openly. Others stared ahead, their eyes hollow, already dead inside. Kelry did not raise his hand. Yalif, from his medical spacesuit, could not. The vote was nearly unanimous when the alarms tore the funeral silence to shreds. Every console in the chamber lit up with screaming, cascading warnings. Spatial distortions of impossible magnitude rippled the fabric of reality at the edge of the star system. Energy signatures, raw and jagged, and unlike anything in the serene databases of a peaceful galaxy, flooded the sensors. Something was arriving not through graceful warp conduits, but by tearing its way into being, creating gravitational shockwaves that registered halfway across the galactic arm. The main view screen activated automatically. The image showed the serene starfield of the system's edge. Then, space itself screamed and bled light. Not one or two, but 12 vicious, simultaneous wounds tore open in the void. From them emerged not ships, but predators. They were sleek, angular, and utterly devoid of aesthetic grace. Their hulls were gunmetal grey, scarred and pitted with the evidence of long journeys through unforgiving space. Weapons batteries, coil guns, laser emitters, missile pods with no possible civilian application bristled from every surface. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized purpose, forming a battle line in seconds, a wall of cold, waiting steel. A broadcast sliced through every frequency, a voice speaking in a guttural, hacking tongue that translation matrices failed to pass. Then it switched to flawless, archaic, galactic standard, but with an accent that had not been heard in living memory. A voice from a tomb. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Valor, commanding the Terran Expeditionary Response Fleet. We have received your distress signal. Earth remembers its commitments. Identify your situation and the nature of your threat. 200 species, millennia of sophisticated culture and enlightened philosophy, froze in a collective, breathless shock. The myth had guns. The fairy tale was made of titanium and wrath. Humanity was real, and they had come. It was Kelry who found his voice, a dry rasp in the stillness. Captain Chen, this is Ambassador Kelry of the Galactic Council. We are under invasion by the Skreda swarm. 27 worlds are gone. Our military resistance is negligible. We are facing annihilation. His voice broke, not with fear, but with the sheer, staggering weight of the moment. We did not believe you were real, until now. A pause stretched, thin and taut. Then Chen's voice returned, and in it, Kelry heard something that chilled him, more than any Skreda shriek. A profound, weary disappointment. We know, Ambassador. We have monitored Council transmissions for millennia. We know you thought us legends, We know you dismantled your fleets. We know you forgot the feel of a weapon in your hand. Another pause, heavy with the judgment of 10,000 silent years. It is fortunate, then, that we did not forget. Transmitting Skrada fleet coordinates. The Valor Task Force is moving to engage. The 12 Terran warships surged forward. They did not accelerate. They unleashed themselves, their drives flaring with a physics-defying fury that painted streaks of hellfire across the stars. The Council had just voted for surrender. Earth, with its arrival, had cast the only vote that mattered, for war. On the tactical display, 12 blue markers streaked toward 30 crimson blips. The Skrada vanguard holding position over a recently evacuated mining colony. They are outnumbered 3-1, Yalith whispered from his chair, his voice a mixture of awe and horror. The Skrada vessels are larger, organic, they regenerate. This is suicide. The humans did not slow. Captain Chen's voice was calm, almost conversational, over the comm. Council forces, hold your position. We will handle initial contact. We need to assess Skrada combat protocols. Chen's fleet split into 3 diamond formations, spreading out in a seemingly reckless, inviting net. The Skrada, sensing easy prey, took the bait. 15 of their bulbous, pulsating ships broke formation and surged toward the nearest human group, moving with the jerky, unpredictable darting of insects. The humans waited until the last possible microsecond. Then, they moved. Kelry's brain struggled to process what he witnessed. Council ships maneuvered with stately, predictable grace. These Terran vessels spun, inverted, and accelerated on vectors that should have turned their crews to paste. They didn't just evade the Skrada's volleys of acidic bioplasma. They seemed to dance between them, as if they had pre-written the swarm's every move. Then they returned fire. Weapons the Council had no names for lit up the dark. Coherent beams of sapphire energy sliced through organic hulls, cauterizing as they cut. Kinetic rounds, moving at a perceptible fraction of light speed, punched through ships and kept going. Missiles corkscrewed on impossible trajectories, chasing targets that tried to flee. And then came the true horror. A localized electromagnetic pulse that caused the Skrada vessels to convulse, their biological systems seizing, their coordination shattered. In 90 seconds, 5 Skrada ships were drifting, oozing husks. In 3 minutes, all 15 attackers were vaporized or disabled. The remaining swarm forces recoiled, holding their position in stunned, silent confusion. The human fleet regrouped with casual, chilling efficiency. Not one ship lost. One vessel displayed minor scoring on its hull, a cosmetic blemish. By the silent stars, Thess whispered, their colors cycling through shock, awe, and a dawning, terrifying understanding. They didn't just survive the attack. They dominated it. Chen's voice returned, all business. Council Leader Moravix, we require strategic intelligence. Skrada supply lines, main fleet concentration, expansion vectors. Data was transmitted in a frantic, grateful stream. Moravix finished with the gravest number. We project their total fleet size at a minimum of 3,000 vessels. 3,000, Chen repeated, her tone unchanged. We brought 12. Request permission to contact Earth for reinforcements. Granted. By all the ancestors, granted. Moravix's energy flared. What do you need? Just stay clear of the weapon arcs and keep your civilians safe. We'll handle the war. Chen out. As the tiny human fleet turned to engage the Skrada ground forces on the colony below, Kelry felt his entire understanding of the universe rearrange itself. Yalith let out a pained, gravelly laugh. Do you see it, Ambassador? 10,000 years. We built gardens, museums, symphonies. They built this. He gestured to the screen, to the retreating forms of the Terran ships. They never assumed the galaxy was safe. They kept their knives sharp, while we filed ours down to nubs. His expression sobered. I am grateful to the core they are here, for I would not want to face them in anger. What followed was a week of dazzling, brutal tuition. The galaxy watched, mesmerized and horrified, as 12 human ships waged a guerrilla war against the swarm's forward elements. They used stellar gravity as a slingshot. They hid in nebulae and asteroid fields, becoming ghosts that struck without warning. They sent false distress calls to splinter enemy groups, then annihilated the isolated fragments. They fought with a willingness to embrace risk that bordered on the suicidal, flying through debris clouds at speeds that allowed for millisecond corrections, sacrificing drone ships in ramming attacks, venting atmospheres to put out fires mid-battle. They fight as if death is irrelevant, Thess observed during a briefing. Kelry, who had been devouring every scrap of human history he could find, shook his head slowly. They fight as if death is merely one possible outcome in the equation, and not the worst one. The worst outcome to them is failing the people they swore to protect. He was granted his chance to understand them firsthand, invited aboard the Valor as an official observer. The ship was a shock to his senses. Gone were the soothing colours, the artistic installations, the gentle atmospherics of council vessels. The Valor was a study in grim utility. Every corridor was a potential barricade. Every wall was reinforced. Every piece of equipment served a lethal or life-sustaining purpose. This was not a ship designed for life, but for the preservation of life amidst death. End PR. Captain Chen met him in the Combat Information Center, a nexus of quiet intensity. She was not the towering brute of legend, but a compact woman with dark eyes that missed nothing. Her hair pulled back severely. Her handshake was firm, her demeanor that of a master artisan assessing a new tool. "Welcome to the war, Ambassador," she said, dispensing with pleasantries. She pointed to a stellar map, blooming with red menace. "We've blunted their advance, but long-range scans show the main swarm body mobilizing. At least 1,000 vessels, maybe more, are converging on this sector. Our reinforcements are 70 hours out. I need to know where to put them. Tell me everything about the Skrada. Not just their ships, their mind." Kelry shared the pitifully little they knew. The hive coordination, the mindless sacrifice, the pure biological hunger. Chen listened, nodded. A collective consciousness. We have a history with such patterns on Earth. Ants. Locusts. The key is not to fight the 1,000 legs, but to find the one brain. She pulled up a star chart, highlighting a dense cluster of early infestations. They came from here. The core of the swarm, the queen, the nexus. It's in this region. We need to find it. That would be a suicide mission, Kelry breathed. Yes, Chen agreed, without hesitation. Which is why I'm taking the Valor. We're the fastest. And we have stealth systems that might get us through. You would risk yourself? The commander of the fleet? Chen looked at him, and in her gaze, he saw the accumulated weight of 10 millennia of lonely vigilance. Ambassador, on Earth we have a saying, never send someone where you won't go yourself. Leadership isn't about giving orders from safety. It's about sharing the risk. She offered a thin, hard smile. Besides, I need to see the Devil's Lair for myself. Before Kelry could formulate a response, the alarms screamed. The tactical officer's voice was tight. Captain, multiple FTL emergencies. Scrada signatures. It's the main fleet. They're here now. The display bloomed with hundreds of crimson markers, a tidal wave of chitin and rage flooding the edge of the system. Kelry's hearts seized. There are too many. Captain, you must retreat. Wait for your reinforcements. Chen didn't even look at the screen. Her eyes were on her crew, who were already moving to battle stations with practiced, grim efficiency. No, Ambassador. We hold here. We make them pay for every inch of space. And when our reinforcements arrive... She finally turned to him, and her smile was gone, replaced by the cold, clean lines of absolute resolve. The swarm will learn the price of threatening Earth's allies. Kelry was escorted to the observation deck by a young lieutenant. Through the transparent hull, he watched the 12 Terran ships turn to face the approaching hundreds. A line of stones against a tsunami. Are you not afraid? He asked the lieutenant. Her face young, yet etched with a solemnity that belonged to someone much older. She considered it. Terrified, sir. But fear is just data. It tells you the situation is dangerous. What you do with that data, that's the only thing that matters. She straightened her uniform. We do our jobs. The Scrada swarm descended, and the battle that would be etched forever in history as the stand at Kelvin's star began. The 12 human ships stood as a bulwark of grim defiance against the living tide of chitin and hunger. The opening salvo from the Scrada main fleet was a storm of bioplasmic fire and kinetic chitin shards that filled the space between formations like a swarm of malevolent stars. The human point defense networks came alive, a brilliant, staccato dance of interceptor fire and laser grids, creating a shimmering curtain of annihilation that slagged 90% of the incoming barrage. The remaining 10% slammed home. The destroyer Vengeance shuddered as its primary drive array was sheared away, leaving it a drifting fortress, its weapons still spitting fury. The cruiser Defiance vented atmosphere from 3 successive hull breaches, internal emergency doors slamming shut with final resonant thumps. The frigate Swift took a direct hit to its reactor housing, its power flickering as the crew fought for a catastrophic emergency shutdown. On the observation deck of the Valor, Kelry watched with a dread that hollowed his bones. This was not the surgical domination of the first skirmish. This was a brutal, grinding exchange. A war of attrition that 12 ships, no matter how advanced, could not win. He saw a Scrada cruiser, its organic hull pulsing with vicious intent, close on the crippled Vengeance. It was over. The galaxy's last, desperate hope would be extinguished here, in a blaze of noble, futile sacrifice. And then space tore itself apart again. But not in 12 places. Not in 50. Across the tactical display, in a staggered, rolling wave of reality-sundering light, hundreds of quantum wake signatures bloomed like deadly flowers. Then thousands. The serene starfield was blotted out by the angular, weapon-studded silhouettes of Terran warships. Battleships whose main guns were as large as Council cruisers. Carriers disgorging clouds of nimble, venomous fighter craft. A wall of cold, purposeful steel that stretched to the sensor horizon. A new voice boomed across the comm, deep, authoritative, and laced with the iron of absolute command. This is Admiral Marcus Rivera of the Terran Second Fleet. Captain Chen, you have held the line with honor. We'll take it from here. All Terran vessels, weapons free. Light 'em up. Let's remind these bugs why humanity earned its reputation. What had been a desperate last stand, transformed in a single breathtaking moment into a calculated slaughter. The Scrader fleet, committed to its overwhelming assault, found itself not surrounding prey, but trapped in the jaws of a predator it never knew existed. The fresh Terran forces, drives flaring with barely contained power, surged forward with a coordination that was beautiful and horrifying to behold. Flanking maneuvers unfolded with geometric precision. Artillery barrages from the massive battleships walked across Scrader formations, each detonation vaporizing multiple vessels. Fighter wings sliced through the swarm like razors through rotten cloth. The Scrader for the first time broke their hive-mind coordination, once their greatest strength became a channel for a unified wave of shock and retreat. Vessels turned, colliding with each other in their panic to flee. The human fleet did not allow it. They pursued with a relentless, cold fury, herding the retreating swarm into kill zones, pre-marked by drone markers, annihilating them in systemic, efficient batches. Kelry turned from the viewport to Lieutenant Park, who stood beside him. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, her fists clenched at her sides, as she watched the crippled Vengeance being enveloped by the protective embrace of 3 Terran repair tenders. "Your species," Kelry said softly, the words thick with emotion, "should be the stuff of our darkest nightmares. Yet, I have never felt such profound safety." Park wiped her cheeks, her smile widening. "That's the whole idea, sir. We're only terrifying if you're the enemy, to our friends." She gestured at the armada, now methodically cleansing the system. "We're just stubborn, contrary apes who refuse to let bullies have their way." The Battle of Kelvin's Star ended in the total rout of the Scrader forward elements. Over 600 swarm vessels were reduced to expanding clouds of particulate organic matter. The Terran fleet suffered no losses, though many ships bore the fresh scars of war. The message was thunderous and clear. The galaxy was no longer undefended. In the weeks that followed, the Council's orbital command station transformed from a place of panicked debate into a joint military headquarters. Human officers, with their crisp uniforms, scarred faces, and eyes that had seen too much, worked alongside wide-eyed Council aides. They taught classes on basic tactics, logistics, damage control, and the psychological fundamentals of warfare, subjects as alien to most delegates as quantum physics. Ambassador Kelry abandoned diplomacy entirely, becoming the most avid student of them all. He followed Commander Jackson Hayes, a human whose silver hair and network of scars spoke of battles predating this war, into tactical briefings. Hayes dissected the recent victory at Meridian Station, where a human strike group had decoyed a larger Scrader force into an asteroid field. They expected a noble fight, Hayes explained to the room of uneasy Council officers, pointing to holographic replay. They expected us to stand and trade blows. We showed them fear, transmitted fake damage reports, ran with our tails between our legs. They took the bait, chased us into the rocks. The hologram showed hidden drone ships, anchored to large asteroids with magnetic grapples, unleashing point-blank broadsides into the confused swarm formation. We used the terrain. We used their arrogance. A crystalline delegate, Serac, their form shimmering with unease, raised a translucent limb. "Commander, is this not dishonorable? Our ancient warrior codes speak of confronting an enemy directly, of challenging them with clarity." Hayes's affable demeanor hardened into something flinty. "Delegate Serac, with respect, those ancient codes are the reason you were on the menu for 27 worlds before we arrived. Honor is a luxury you get to enjoy when both sides agree to the rules. The Scrada don't have rules. They have teeth and hunger. You can be honorable in a mass grave, or you can be pragmatic on your feet." The silence in the room was thick enough to swim in. Hayes let it hang before continuing, his voice softer but no less firm. "We have lines we won't cross. We don't target civilians. We don't use weapons we can't control. We don't torture. But inside those lines, we will do whatever it takes to win. We will lie. We will cheat. We will make them afraid of the dark. Because the only morality that matters in a fight for survival is the morality of the living." Later, on an observation deck, Kelry found Hayes staring at the fleet, a galaxy's worth of warships being refitted and resupplied. "You think we're monsters?" Hayes stated, not a question. "I think you are the most effective beings I have ever witnessed." Kelry replied carefully, "You saved us. But your pragmatism is frightening." "Good," Hayes said, turning. His eyes were the color of a winter sky. "It should scare you. It should scare everyone. Ambassador, we spent 10,000 years in the dark, watching you all from a distance. We saw you melt down your swords into plowshares. We saw you forget that the universe doesn't care about your good intentions. We hoped, we prayed you'd never need us. But we prepared for the day you would." He gestured toward the Scrada-held sectors on a nearby star map, bleeding crimson. "And we were right. This is the cost of forgetting. This is the bill coming due." "How do you live with it?" Kelry asked, the question that had haunted him. The violence, the killing. Hayes was silent for a long time, watching a crew of human engineers, laughing as they worked, float past the viewport. "We remember why," he said finally. Each word weighted. "Every shot we fire, every swarm ship we break, it's to protect someone who can't fight back. A child on a colony world, a scientist in a lab, a farmer. That's not murder, Ambassador. That's a shield. And that," he tapped his own chest, "is what lets us sleep at night. Far from the core, in the lightless depths of Scrada-controlled space, a different kind of lesson was being learned." Hive Commander Zexthor had survived 17 engagements with the humans, an unprecedented feat that had carved a sliver of individual notoriety within the hive mind. In an analysis chamber aboard a massive bioship, Zexthor studied salvaged human artifacts, a mangled escape pod, fragments of a uniform, a data slate. The information within was more terrifying than any weapon schematic. It showed humans fighting each other in conflicts of staggering scale and brutality. It showed cities vanishing in fire, hatreds spanning generations, a species seemingly bent on self-destruction. The swarm had expected this to reveal a fatal weakness, a fracture point. Instead, Zexthor reported to the overarching consciousness with dawning horror. They are not one mind. They are billions of minds, choosing unity. Their warfare was not a flaw. It was training. They have tested every tactic, every weapon, against enemies who think like them. They did not forget war. They refined it. To fight them is to fight a swarm that is also a pack of individual thinking wolves. The hive mind, an entity of pure consumption, struggled with this paradox. Its greatest strength, perfect coordination, was being countered by a foe that combined coordination with terrifying, unpredictable creativity. Aboard the Terran carrier Titan, Kelry sought to understand the individuals within the machine. He met Sergeant Maria Gonzalez in a zero-gravity training bay, where her Marines moved like acrobatic predators. "Why?" he asked simply, watching them practice breaching maneuvers. "Why board a Sprada ship? It is the most dangerous duty imaginable." Gonzalez, a compact woman whose calm demeanor belied the focused intensity in her eyes, grinned. "Because it works, sir. They adapt to our guns. But they can't adapt to a Marine in their engine room with a plasma charge. We go in, we gather intel, we wreck critical systems, and we spread fear. They're starting to scuttle their own ships when they detect boarding pods. They're learning that humans inside their hull means the fight is already over. But you risk everything." "We volunteered," she said, the smile fading. "Every one of us. We know the risk. We accepted because of what we're protecting." She looked at him and her gaze was unflinching. "We fight so species like yours can keep building gardens, not fortresses. We fight so your children never have to learn what a boarding axe feels like. We're the monsters who fight monsters, so the good people don't have to become what we are." The war's turning point came at the Hell's Gate Nebula. A massive Skrada force, seeking to punch through to the core, found the human fleet waiting within the ionized, sensor-scattering gases. The humans didn't present a battle line. They vanished. Using the nebula's radiation to mask their signatures, they broadcast false fleet movements, seeded space with stealth mines disguised as debris, and turned the entire cosmic cloud into a lethal, confusing maze. The Skrada entered, confident in their numbers. They exited, what was left of them, shattered. Human ships materialized from the glowing mist, struck, and dissolved back into it. They overloaded Skrada sensors with tailored radiation bursts at the moment of attack. Hive Commander Zexthor, leading one flank, finally comprehended the lesson. This was not just a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans were proving that in war, imagination was a deadlier weapon than numbers. In the battle's grim aftermath, Kelry found Captain Chen on a quiet observation deck, staring at the tangled wreckage of human and Skrada ships drifting together. 8 ships, she said, her voice hollow. 1,600 faces, names, stories. I knew the captains. Some were friends. You won a great victory, Kelry offered, the words feeling inadequate. I know, she whispered, but victory has a cost, Ambassador. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you a lie. She turned to him, and the exhaustion in her eyes was a bottomless well. We fight because no one else can. We win because we've made a study of it. But we never forget the price on the tag. The final confrontation loomed. Reconnaissance, pieced together from 100 probing attacks and captured navigational data, pointed to the Verax system. The Skrada homeworld. The human fleet, now a staggering armada of over 2,000 vessels, gathered at the edge of the star system. Admiral Rivera's voice, was calm steel over the fleet-wide comm. Today we end this. They will fight for their home with everything they have, and we will still defeat them. Not because we are better, not because we are righteous, but because we are human, and humanity does not know how to quit. All ships, advance! The Battle of Verax was a cataclysm. Orbital bioplatforms, grown over millennia, opened fire with planet-cracking weapons. The human fleet advanced into the storm, their point defense creating a moving fortress of light. Ships died on both sides, painting the void with silent, expanding flowers of gas and metal. It was Sergeant Gonzalez's Marines, in a desperate, brutal boarding action on a Skradar command ship, who finally cornered Hive Commander Zexthor. In the pulsing, organic heart of the vessel, surrounded by the bodies of fallen Marines and Skradar warriors, Gonzalez leveled her weapon at the injured commander. Zexthor spoke through a damaged translator, its buzzing voice carrying not hatred, but a strange, exhausted awe. Strong, you are the myth. We studied your wars, we learned your patterns, and yet, understanding is not enough. You fight as if death is a triviality. Strong. Call off your swarm, Gonzalez said, her finger on the trigger. Strong, It is already done, Zexthor buzzed. It is already done. We ask for the young, the nurseries below. They are not warriors. They are potential. Can your kind of violence show mercy? The question was patched to the Valor, to Admiral Rivera and Captain Chen. The entire fleet waited, weapons poised over a world of billions. The silence on the bridge was heavier than gravity. Chen spoke first, her voice clear. If we accept your surrender, the terms will be absolute. The Skradar are confined to this system. You will be disarmed, monitored. Any resurgence, and we return. You will release all prisoners, provide full accounting of your conquests. Your species spends the next 1,000 cycles proving it can be something other than a plague. Do you accept? We accept, Zexthor replied instantly. The swarm surrenders. The firing stopped. An eerie, ringing silence fell over the battlefield. The war was over. Weeks later, in the Galactic Council chamber, under a dome now reflecting the peaceful light of 100 rescued stars, Moravix stood before the assembled delegates. We once gathered here in despair, the council leader said, their energy field bright and steady. We were saved by a myth made flesh. Today, we formally recognize the Terran Alliance and planet Earth as a founding protectorate of the Galactic Council. Captain Chen, in her simple blue uniform, accepted the recognition. We did not come for honors, she said. We came because you called. That is what allies do. Earth will answer if you call again. But, her eyes swept the chamber, do not forget the cost of this war. Remember that peace is not the default state of the universe. It is a garden that must be constantly tended, and sometimes fiercely defended. Later, as the Valor prepared for its long journey home, Kelry stood with Chen one last time. Will you stay? He asked. Some of us will, as teachers, advisors. A reminder, she said, watching the glittering council world below. But most are going home. You need to learn to stand on your own. We can't always be the galaxy's emergency response. Kelry nodded, a profound gratitude settling in him. It is comforting to know you are out there, watching, preparing. That's the whole point, Ambassador, Chen said, offering her hand. He took it. The human gesture, now familiar. An old saying on Earth. We sleep soundly in our beds, because rough men stand ready in the night to visit violence on those who would do us harm. Every peaceful civilization needs its guardians. We just happen to be the ones who never put the weapon down. The valor departed, one spear point retreating into the arsenal of humanity. The galaxy, forever changed, began its slow heal. In his final report, archived for all future generations, Ambassador Kelry wrote, "They thought Earth was a fairy tale, a myth to frighten children into cooperation. Then the warships translated into reality, and we learned the profound and terrible truth. Humanity was real. They had been watching, waiting, preparing. And when our hope was exhausted, they answered our cry with the one thing we had forgotten how to be: warriors. Not for conquest, but for defense, protectors who carry the burden of violence, so that others may know peace. May we remember this lesson. May we strive to never need to call them again. But if the darkness ever returns, I believe, with all that I am, that humanity will answer. For that is what guardians do. And in the hidden shipyards of Earth, and on colonies scattered across the dark, the work never stopped. The watching never ceased. For history's clearest lesson is that peace is not a gift. It is a prize, won by those strong enough to defend it, and cherished by those wise enough to remember its cost.